if you have a shirt that has buttons and you plan to use cloth dynamics on the shirt, but you don't want it to affect the buttons because, of course, the shirt could stretch and kind of bend and fold over, but you don't want that to happen to a button because normally buttons are a hard surface item. There's a few ways that we can go about doing that. Let's start by, I'm going to close that. Let's start by making a shirt. So start with a box. You don't have to build it this way, but I'm just going to build a real quick shirt. Not really focusing on the shirt, but more about setting up the dynamics. So start with a box. I like to turn, I'm going to go ahead and center it, and then I'm going to turn symmetry on. Shift D for subdivide polygons, and I'm going to metaform once, just to get a little more geometry. Okay, zoom out a little bit. Select these bottom polygons. I'm going to kind of flatten them with the stretch tool, stretch them out a little bit, stretch them out a little bit. E for extender plus, come down. E for extender plus, come down. E for extender plus, and I'm using the stretch tool to just move it down. You could use the move tool. That's one way of adding more segments to this. I can also shift K and just knife across. I could also select these points and control B and edge bevel those open if I'd like. I'm going to go ahead and select some of these points, stretch them down a little bit, and select these points, select them down a little bit, or just move them down a little bit. Grab these polygons. This will be where the sleeves can be. E, H for stretch, E, H for stretch, E, H for stretch. Just getting a few segments in there. And I'm going to grab the top of the shirt, kind of stretch it a little flat, E, and then the top view, size it in a little bit, and maybe move it up. Now, I'm just going to make a single-sided poly shirt. I'm not going to give it thickness. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these end caps and delete. We just don't need them. I'll hit tab, and right now it's a pretty sad looking shirt, but with dynamics it'll kind of fold on itself and things like that, and it'll dress it up a little bit, and if I wanted to I could spend some more time dressing up the model. But let's focus on the dynamics. I am going to go ahead and make it double-sided. I said single-sided meaning it's just going to be a thin shirt, but as far as the surface goes, let's give it a surface. Q for change surface. I remember change surface. Q is quality surfaces. Maybe that'll help remember the shortcut key. I'm going to call this shirt. Let's give it a color. We'll go a little Charlie Brown on this one. And make sure smoothing's on. I didn't have a double-sided option, but I do in the surface editor. Come over here to shirt, double-sided. Close that. So now I got my double-sided shirt. Okay, with that made, let's go ahead and make some buttons. And I'm not going to worry about trying to mimic the image that I showed earlier. It's the same concept no matter where the buttons are going to go. So I'm going to go to layer 2, put layer 1 in the background. Let's make, this will be our clown shirt buttons. I'm just going to make a ball. And they're going to be really big buttons. That way we can see them. And I'm going to tuck them into the shirt. Q for change surface or quality surfaces. Button, and why not? We're going to go a little clown on this. And there we go. And with that still selected, I'm going to go to full screen on my right view and copy paste, move, copy paste, move, and actually I'll move this one up to here and copy paste, move this one down to here, and I want to kind of even these out a little bit, so select both layers. Actually, I'll grab this stuff as well. I'll grab that too. I can't make up my mind. So I'll move that down a little bit, deselect, and just kind of slide this down a little bit. Okay, they're not perfectly evenly distributed, but I'm kind of getting anal here, and there's no reason to for what we're wanting to show. So I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to take one of these buttons, copy, file, new object, paste, F2, and we're going to save this off. I just hit S for save object as. I'm going to call this button 001, go back to my other object here that has both these layers. I'm going to keep them in separate layers. It'll help me work out and lay out the way I need to. So File, Save Object As. Instead of button, we'll call this shirt underscore buttons 001. Just in case if I want to change my model up, I can always change the version number and still keep this one. So I'll hit Save. Now, I've got everything I need, and now we just need to send it over to layout. So send object to layout. Here we go. We're ready to start working with dynamics, except I'm going to go ahead and build some collision objects just so we can get this into play. So I'm going to come over to the Items tab under Add Dynamic Object, Collision, and I'm going to make two collision objects. So I'm going to go ahead and name this Arms. Instead of a sphere, okay, by default the type is sphere, I'm going to change this to box. And I'm going to size it down, just say 0.5. If I rotate, we'll see that it's sitting right in the center there. And I'm just going to change my bounce bind power to 50, friction 50, fix 50. That's usually what I do, and then I can go and adjust it if needed. Go ahead and close that. H for stretch. Let's get some temporary arms in there. I'm going to shrink that in a little bit and shrink that a little bit. Maybe I'll move it up a little bit as well. Okay, I could go ahead and go over Add and make another collision object, but I'm just going to clone this. So I'm going to come over here and hit Clone. Number of clones 1. With it still selected, rename. Call this Body. Okay, Y for rotate. This way, I already have the same settings. Not that that's, the most important thing, but it did save me the time of typing it in. So there's going to be my neck and body. Okay, so I'm going to select my object, P for Properties, Dynamics, Add Dynamic, Cloth, double click to get the settings, and I'm going to, let's just bounce over to Collision. Yeah, I'll just put all. It's one surface for the shirt, but I'll go ahead and select all. Shows all the points over here that are highlighted that are going to be affected by the collision. Come over to etc. Let's go ahead and give it some gravity. I'm just trying -4. I can always add more. And for preset, we'll just choose thin. It doesn't really matter which one we choose, because if we don't like what we see, we just go adjust the settings over on the Basic tab. But I always like to just start with the preset and then go from there. I'm going to move this over, and let's just see what happens. I'm going to calculate, and there we go. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and do 90 frames, so I'm going to come down here and change 60 to 90, and because of that, I've only got 60 frames calculated. I need to go ahead and calculate again, and I'll get all my frames. For what I'm trying to show in this video, that looks like a shirt to me, and it's draping, and you can definitely see that if I rotate this, where the buttons were, right here, well, they're not touching anymore, and they're not even in the same place. So it accomplishes what we need to be able to see. Okay, so our goal is we want to be able to have the buttons stick to the shirt and move around with the shirt, but we don't want them to deform. It's a pretty easy setup. I'm going to close this. I'm going to select the buttons, M for motion options, and for parent item, just choose the shirt. Okay. Now that's not enough, because it just knows the default shape and basically the pivot point. So we need it to lock to the shirt. To do that, P for Properties. With the button selected, come over to Deform, Add Displacement, and choose Effects Hard Link. Okay. I can close this, and as you can see, let's select, say, the collision object here, just so that we can really see what's going on. I just was trying to show that we don't have to see that wireframe, so we can really see. So there we go. Buttons are sticking, they're going with it. It's as if they're part of the shirt, but they're not deforming. They're still maintaining their shape. So that's one way of going and attaching buttons to a shirt that have dynamics on it. But there's also another way. Let's come over and select the shirt again. P for properties, come over to the Dynamics tab, open up the properties here. I'm going to rotate that view a little bit so we can see. And I'm going to come over to the Edit Effects tab, select the Edit tool, and I'm going to pick a point on the shirt. We've already got buttons here. I'm just going to add a button right here. So I'm selecting this point on the shirt. And for command, I'm going to choose Make Path. And what it does is it takes and creates a null object that has baked motion. If we look down here in the timeline, we see every key has a keyframe. Okay, every frame has a keyframe, and the null object has the exact motion of that point on the shirt. So, since we have that, all we need to do is, I'm going to go ahead and move up to frame 0. You don't have to, but just so we can put it in its original spot. And with it selected, I'm going to replace object with, and I'm going to come over to my button that we made, that individual button. And now instead of a null, if I scrub through, you'll see that that button has the motion of that point, therefore it's sticking to it. So either way works. If I had to pick one way as a preference, I would definitely pick the effects hard link, because if I change my calculations on my shirt, like change some settings and I want a different look, I would have to redo the make path and replace the button again, whereas with the hard link I don't have to do that. Okay, so the hard link will update no matter what this geometry is doing, whether it's being manipulated with morphs or any kind of displacements. I can use hard link to attach it as long as I'm using cloth effects as the final result for that. And then for the ball that's using the make path, I'd have to remake path for that. So two options, two ways to go about putting buttons that are hard surface objects onto a object that has cloth dynamics.